It's so interesting.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting. It's interesting.
Welcome to It's So Interesting, where people talk about their work and life experience. I am George Spitzer. I have with me today Frank Goss of Sullivan Goss, an American gallery in Santa Barbara, California. You have curators who are...
We do.
You yourself are an expert in quite a few things, but you also have curators who are also experts.
We do.
Do you... all your curators generally trained by you, or are they trained professionally elsewhere, and do they have specialties?
They all come here with a certain expertise. Most of them have studied in colleges or universities as art historians or art history writers. When they come here, they get more instruction in that. All of our curators write, all of our curators curate, all of our curators are familiar in depth with their specialty. We have Nathan Vonk, whom you know, who is our sculpture curator, and so if a sculptor calls here and wants to know how to show at Sullivan Goss, we just refer them to Nathan. If they're a living artist, we would refer them to Susan Bush, who is a wonderful curator of contemporary art and knows there's a special kind of person who's going to be able to work with artists. Art, as you might imagine, I would say that most good art comes from a fairly deep well in the artist, and so when you are looking at it on behalf of the gallery, they see you looking at them, and they are anxious that you like them, that you like their work. So to work with that sort of set of circumstances at the start is fairly difficult, because we probably get 5 or 6 artists a day that either send us by email their images, or send a letter or a package with their material in it, or they come in, they walk in and say, I've got my stuff out in the car, you want to see it? That marks them as terribly amateurish. No artist should ever be schlepping their stuff into a gallery, because the first person through the door is going to go, well, what are those paintings the guy's bringing in? And not look at the art on the wall. And we are we champion the work on the wall. We don't champion a guy walking in with stuff out of his trunk. So Susan's very good at having the patience to work with them, and having that sort of lifetime goal that she would be the one when the next George O'Keeffe walks in, and maybe they walk in with their own art under their arm, to not just throw them out and say, learn some manners and learn protocol in galleries and get out of here. She would never do that, and she's much more polite than that. I would do that. And so she's always looking, because that person walking in and not knowing how the art gallery works might in fact be the next George O'Keeffe. So she's always looking for that great next artist. Then our third and final, then the longest serving staff member is Jeremy Tessmer, and Jeremy is generally thought as the curator of vintage, the work that is by artists who are no longer with us. And that way I can assist each of them with what they're doing, and I'm not responsible for any of that. So people, dead artists, go to Jeremy, living artists go to Susan, living sculptors, dead sculptors go to Nathan, and it makes the division of labor here. We don't cross each other's paths very often, because if I'm looking at a sculptor, I say, very quickly, you need to talk to Nathan Vonk about this. If it's a living artist, Susan Bush, and if it's a thing of days gone by, Jeremy. And as I said, I work with all those people, and to make sure that there's cohesion in what we show, because we have 7 galleries here. That would be 7 separate rooms where we have things. And it's important that when you walk in, if you are a visitor to the gallery, you get a sense of what we're about, and not one particular strain, or to be showing, let's say, some variant. And we do show variants from time to time. We don't want people leaving saying, they only show the work of women artists. That would be a problem for us to have that happen. So we are always trying to make sure that there's a sense of balance between all those curational activities.
When you work with your curators, who you've worked with for many, many years,
yes,
and sometimes decades, you get to develop a relationship, one of trust. Mm-hmm. The fact remains that it's a tendency of most business managers and gallery managers to be micromanagers. Are you a micromanager?
I'm sure there are people who would say that. But in general, I don't like detail. I don't like the nits and grits. I like the bigger picture. So my effort is to work with each of them on what we ought to be thinking about overall, and listening to them when they have suggestions of what we ought to add to overall. And we run like a real corporation. We have an annual meeting. We set our goals for the year. And the goals have to do with who we're going to show, when we're going to show them, how many pieces by those artists we're going to show, what the values are. Because we want the let's say the young collector is just starting out, to be able to come and find something that's on the wall that they absolutely are knocked out by, that's $2,000 and not $50,000. But we also want the sophisticated, thoroughly developed collector to come in here and walk out with let's say an Andrew Wyeth. And you were here to see, we had an Andrew Wyeth show a little while back that had, 20 Andrew Wyeths in it. And there's not an Andrew Wyeth available for under $200,000. So we want people to have all of those opportunities, but it's much deeper than that. We also, we're merchants, and so we're trying to merchandise always something that's fairly rough to merchandise, which means that you don't want all the paintings to be blue. You don't want all the paintings to be closed landscapes or open landscapes. You don't want all the artists to be males and no females. You don't want to somehow ignore the black community, the brown community, the gay community, the women community. Those are all parts of our culture, and we want all those people to feel free to come in here and find things that reflect them.
In terms of trust of your curators, do you send them out to the field when you hear a lead? Or, you can't be everywhere, but you have to send them out, I believe, with a checkbook.
In general, if a check is going to be written, I'm going to be involved in it, maybe by phone or by email or by Skype or something, because the ultimate commitment in dollars are from me, and ultimately the risk is my risk. So they will very often go into the field. Susan is traveling alone in June to Aspen, where she will represent the company with 40 paintings that she will hang. And this is a modern woman. She's not afraid to schlep 40 paintings to Aspen. She's not afraid to hang 40 paintings. She's not, this is a day and night job, so she'll finish hanging the show on a Wednesday afternoon, and Wednesday night she's got to be in a dress and heels and ready to show the art. She's the only one there. She's got to be able to be nice to people and go after those that look like they really are interested in a painting and sell them. And that'll go on for her for 6 days. 6 days of 8, 9, 10-hour days. And it's part of our life. Jeremy very often goes and makes field visits on his own. Nathan and I went back to a good cooperative thing. We went back to Manalapan, New York, and Manhattan, where we bought a state of a little more than 100 paintings by an artist whose name is Leon Dabo, who's a very important American artist, whose stuff had somehow escaped the savagery of earlier art dealers. So the estate stayed together. His medals that he won in World War I were there. His correspondence was there. All the catalogs from his shows were there. The flag that he was buried in as a national hero was there.
It's like Tutankhamun's tomb.
It absolutely is like that. So we did that together, and once we had, maybe all together with drawings and everything, or a couple 300 pieces. Then Nathan drove it across the country all by himself. So yes, here's millions of dollars in a back of a truck, and our insurance is very limited, so he can't let that out of his sight. So at night he has to be in a motel, and he has to back the truck up to the window and door, and he has to leave the window open all night long so you can see the truck. If the truck is out of his line of sight, our insurance doesn't cover it. So it's an interesting business. It's got all these little side lights, and the people who work here are completely trusted. You are sitting in a room with maybe $1 million worth of art. Our people are fully trained in that world. It's easy to put your foot through, the painting sitting on the floor, and put your foot through it. They've been around these paintings for long enough that they know how not to have that happen. And they are completely responsible and in all ways honest and sensitive and bright. They're all very bright, and they take their job seriously. They carry the name art dealer as a sort of proud thing.
Well, so effectively, here you and your gallery, a lot of it's got to do with reputation.
Yes.
You developed it over the decades.
Absolutely.
Your curators are part of that reputation. Can they get better?
All of us can, and me included. And part of how I get better is listening to them. They'll walk into, we meet like any good corporation once a week for a couple hours, and we talk about what's going to happen during the week and what our goals are and who we're going to call and what we're going to exhibit and how we're going to do that and which artists we're going to interview. And that's the sort of weekly meeting. We kind of march forth from that as a united group. But when I go to those meetings, every meeting, somebody will come forward with an idea that's out of left field. So my job is to not go, no, that's not a good idea, or, I haven't been thinking that way, but to listen to that. And every meeting, somebody brings up some topic that is coming from elsewhere. And we all travel in the art world. So there are exhibits in Los Angeles. There's an exhibit coming up of student work at UCSB. There's an exhibit at Westmont coming up. There's the Oak Group showing There are all these shows that we try to get to so that we know what's being produced amongst the younger artists of America. Susan travels all over. She goes up to San Francisco, to New York. She went down to the Laguna Beach Art School not too long ago, and we found a good artist there. So that part of the business is shared, and they are, I think, largely because they're younger. They're smarter, and they're more adventuresome than I am. You know, age sort of stiffens us, and we get less pliable as we get older. And what's nice about these, I think Nathan and Jeremy are 36 or so, 37. That's a very young art dealer. So they're always coming up with ideas. Today, Jeremy was talking about a computer sort of use of an existing computer company who sort of advertises in the world of decorators and how we might participate in that. It's an idea that I hadn't thought of, and Nathan was asking about, we lost power here a week ago. Well, actually, you and I were scheduled to have something going on, and this, all that power outage meant that all my appointments were dominoed in cascade to move a date or two. Nathan was talking about moving our server to an off-site server, because when the power goes out here, our server's here, and it means that we can get into our own database at that point. So they're bright guys and gals, and they're very much, I mean, clearly you can see when you listen to them and hear them daily that they're the next generation.
Apropos that thought, I want to explore a little bit about how you became a gallery owner, because there's no school for gallery owners. There's no degree in gallery owners, successful ones. Are you effectively training your three main curators to be the next generation running this one?
Clearly, they will run galleries. I hope it's this one. Mm-hmm. That requires a certain risk on their part and a certain risk on my part, and we're kind of talking about that now. Mm-hmm. I would love it if they would be the next set of owners in the gallery. I know that they, even should they end up elsewhere, they will stay. I mean, we've had lots of sort of graduates of the School of Sullivan Goss over the years. They all leave here and they're all opening their own galleries. I mean, there are probably a dozen gallery owners around the United States, including, I think, South Carolina, but it might be North Carolina, Santa Fe, Taos, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco. I mean, they end up running their own galleries or working at another gallery.
The Sullivan and Goss University.
There you are. And that's the school.
Thank you for taking your time to be with us, Frank.
You're welcome.
If you want to contact Frank, you go to the website for It's So Interesting, and there's the information.
Good. Well, thank you, George. It's a pleasure.
So interesting.
It's so interesting.
So interesting. It's interesting.